mindful of the time. And I do have one last question regarding Michael that I wanted to ask you all as we can finish up on this point. I think that through the tenor of conversation that we've had, I've been very pleased that we've pretty much hit on most of the major points that I think that Michael brought to the table when speaking about international leftism. And I would like to know, just to close from each of you, in the continuing work that going forward from this point, how do you see what you're going to do, what your plans are, fitting into that particular vision? Is there anything that you see that really resonates with what Michael was planning on doing or what he had done before?
I'm more than happy to go first.
Please, Milton.
One of the last shows that Michael had, of course, I was on that show. And at the end of the show, but first of all, before I say what happened, I want to say I'm so indebted to Michael for allowing me to discuss people that are normally not spoken about, people like Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso, people like Amilcar Cabral, this great intellectual revolutionary in Guinea-Bissau, people like Patrice Lumumba, people like Julius Nyerere, who introduced African socialism in Tanzania, but at the end was defeated by the World Bank and IMF. People like Samora Machel, people like Chris Hani in South Africa, Steve Biko in South Africa. So I'm eternally indebted to Michael for allowing me to speak about these individuals. But at the end of the last show I had with Michael, I said, Michael, I've finally done what you've been pushing me to do, which was to launch my own podcast, which of course I'm very eager to let people know, and also invite people that are listening to visit, called African History Club on Patreon. Without Michael, I never would have even thought of doing that. But because Michael was so persistent, and every time he invited me on his show, the first thing he'd ask me was, Milton, when are you going to launch the podcast? When are you going to launch the podcast? Maybe more than 10 times. So I just got tired. And I said, today, Michael, as we close today's show, I have an announcement. I just launched African History Club. So that's how I would like to add my contribution today as well.
Thank you, Milton. That's beautiful. And I do remember actually noting that was a question that had crossed my mind, but I'm glad you mentioned it. And African History Club, I hope that the crossover there, and as I mentioned before, the clear illumination in African politics and history that your segments did with Michael, I'm sure that you'll get a number of viewers from TMBS crew.
Thank you.
So
I could jump in really quick.
Please.
First of all, I think that if anyone is newer to Michael's work, you owe it to yourself to go into his entire backlog and really just watch every single segment that he did, because it's not just retelling the news. It's a really particular insight that he had that was able to bring such depth. It was just really incredible. I mean, even things that I felt like would be redundant, I would watch him talking about it. I'm like, oh, you know what? I never thought about it that way. And he would just have such a unique point of view that was really, really important, that I feel like everyone get that under your belt, first of all. And now how do we build? As Michael was going to launch, or I think he already did, weekends with Anna Kasparian, he wanted to continue to build left media projects and also inevitably leave those over to people who could take over, continue to start and engage with different projects that other people could then continue with. So again, he had a huge sense of humility, and that's how I hope to approach my work in the future. The insight that he had, and also the humility, and not taking myself too seriously, having a laugh now and again about how fucked up everything is. But yeah, I mean, and reading a lot more. I mean, because I get stuck in this addiction stuff with the constant, the Twitter feed and
Right.
news cycle. And I feel like taking a cue from Michael and really burying myself
Yep.
in some books and connecting.
I do too.
Let's call each other once in a while. Let's connect face to face and let's understand each other's differences, because we are never going to build a coalition unless we understand that our differences are far less than our similarities. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you.
Well put.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say, like looking back, I really appreciate, Michael giving me the opportunity and giving other people the opportunity to talk about the Kurdish question. Everybody remembers him for his advocacy of Lula, but, I remember him, he got in contact with me in 2016. We talked about Turkey. We talked about the HDP and its struggle against the Erdogan and Erdoganism. He was an advocate for Selahattin Demirtas, the imprisoned leader of that party. So I appreciated that. I appreciate him taking sometimes controversial stands. He was supportive of Rojava, which is a controversial issue on the left. We can, he got a lot of attack and accusations of being like selling out to imperialism, but he took a line that he believed in and argued it in good faith. And he was willing to criticize people he greatly respected. Jacobin asked us, I think last year, to write about Ilhan Omar's not voting for the Armenian genocide legislation and her response to Turkey's invasion of Rojava in Syria. And, he was very reticent about writing something, but he wanted to write something, not because he wanted to dunk on Ilhan Omar, but he wanted to do better. And, after the article, we'd made a small mistake in the article, and Ilhan Omar's office had reached out to us and Michael spoke to him, and he said, look, it's fine. We agree with that, lots of things, but hey, you should really come out against Erdogan's, at least his political imprisonments inside Turkey. And, I don't know if he had an effect on Ilhan Omar's position on that. But, 6 months later, she was out there saying Erdogan should be releasing these political prisoners who are inside Turkey and more openly criticizing Turkey's sort of activities in Syria. So Michael was, willing to take controversial stands that perhaps not everybody would agree with, but he always did it in good faith, and I appreciate that. Going forward, I mean, like, I don't know if I would open a podcast. I kind of think that the podcast market is definitely filled with much better people than myself. But, like Michael, one of the things Michael, his passing really brought home to me was like, stay in contact with people, like send them a message from time to time. So, like I always I always message David Griscom from time to time. I talked with, Ben Burgess. We got to know each other after Michael's passing, and we've worked together on a number of things. So just, being there, being willing to be humble, to share my expertise where I have my expertise, and to, work as part of a community. And that's what Michael was doing. He was trying to build, that's why even when people drove him crazy, he never brought that into the public sphere, because his objective was not to create Twitter drama. It was not to create like clicks for himself. It was not to be like one of these guys who gets followed because he dunks on people, but because he wanted to actually build something and use his charisma, his personality to build, like you said, build institutions that would survive him. And I'm glad to see some of these things have survived him. So I don't know personally exactly what I could do, but I would like to see more spaces for us to debate these issues, to talk about things like foreign policy, to talk about this left internationalism, to articulate what we actually want, and to have good faith disagreements on policies, rather than ending up going, you're the imperialist stooge, you're the sellout, you're this, you're working for Russia, you're working for China, you're working, this stupid kind of conversation, which really serves no one on the left.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that what I really liked about Michael, in addition to what everyone was saying, and just to build up on what Djene just remarked, is that he really modeled on his own person the type of politics that we will need to move from a subculture to a more mainstream culture. And I think that people listening to this probably already agree, but just the message of like, if you disagree with someone, there's no need to have like a psychopathic hatred of Jacobin or Chapo Trap House or anything like that. I think that that type of stuff festers in these tiny communities. And I think that one of Michael's projects to make this a mainstream thing was to move beyond that. And I think that is something that we could all do going forward, because I do think in the next 3 to 5 years at most, a lot of like this little world that we're all a part of is going to really go mainstream through a variety of different avenues, and we need to be ready for that, and we need to do it right, and we need to do it so there's not internecine, battles that go nowhere. And so I think that's a good legacy of Michael's to take forward. I think his project will be completed, tragically without him, but it will be completed and we'll get going in the next few years.
Folks, it's been a pleasure to try and play the role of Michael, albeit very, very poorly and without the impressions. But I know that, we all know that he would have been delighted to be a part of this conversation, or at least that it's being had in his honor. And certainly here's to many more. I'd like to thank you for your time across the different time zones and close it out there. So thank you guys, and hope the TMBS crew and all the audience have enjoyed it as much as I have. So thank you.
A luta continua.